So today we are here with Manesh. Manesh is a PhD student at McGill University. You're a third-year PhD student. I believe you're originally from Vancouver, where you did a master's degree in cognitive systems, and now you're doing a PhD in neuroscience. And welcome to the podcast. And one of the things that I found interesting in your channel is you're kind of an expert. Your sort of area of interest in your PhD is specifically neuroscience, but specifically the default mode network, which gets a lot of press in the psychedelic world. So first, could you talk about what the default mode network is and how does that relate to psychedelics?
Yeah, for sure. And first, thank you for having me. It's awesome to be able to talk about these things. To go into what the default mode network is, first, like the way I measure brain activity, the way my research approaches brain activity is through FMRI, which stands for functional magnetic resonance imaging. And it's basically a way for us to measure the brain of somebody while they're active, while they're thinking or doing something, without opening up their head, essentially. And in a nutshell, what it does is it involves these like massive, crazy, powerful magnets, which alter the kind of properties of hydrogen atoms in your brain, in your blood. And a certain part of our brain has more oxygen being pumped to it. You can see that through the fMRI because you're able to see how the magnetic properties of hydrogen atoms change. And so we know that when there's more activity in an area, there's more neurons firing, there's more oxygen being sent over there. And so what fMRI does, it picks up what's called the blood oxygen level dependent signal, or BOLD. And basically, the signal just does that. It kind of is an indirect way of measuring brain activity by looking at changes in blood oxygenation. And so, yeah, so when you see these images of the brain, like red and orange, like blobs on the brain image, it's like usually that. It's like those are kind of representations of blood level changes, essentially, or oxygen level changes in certain parts of the brain. And so there's so many complex things we can do with this. And, to bridge from there to the default mode network, you could think of, if you have the whole brain as this complex thing, and in order to understand it, you have to separate it into something that's more manageable, right? And so you got to separate it into different brain regions is what usually is done. And there's a whole variety of ways to do this. But one way you could think about that is, if you take the brain as a whole, so like what sub portions of this brain are like correlate with each other and like more with each other than the rest of the brain, right? It's like, how can we separate this entire brain into distinct portions which seem to be working together, essentially? And so you get from blood oxygen level changes in the brain, which index activity, and then you get correlations and activity patterns between little small aspects of the brain, and those form into regions. And then you look at the correlations between regions to find networks, which is sets of brain regions which interact with each other more than they interact with each other more than they interact with the rest of the brain. So you can kind of separate them out as this set of brain regions that do something and play some combined functional role. And so there's like a whole variety of networks that have been kind of derived from the brain in this way. And one of them is the default mode network. And so, the default mode network is one of the most fascinating ones because it's involved in a lot of the more abstract, complex aspects of our thinking that perhaps like separate us from other animals, right? So stuff like thinking about the beliefs of other people, or projecting ourselves into the future, and imagination and fantasy, and also remembering our past. And it's also involved in like things like conceptual knowledge and kind of our conceptual understanding of the world, and also our sense of self. It mediates kind of processes that differentiate ourselves from other people, and other, I guess, other stimuli, other objects, and a whole variety of other functions. And so like it's super interesting. It does so many things. It's very complex. And yeah, so for my PhD, I really wanted to study it in a variety of ways to, kind of look at different aspects of the default mode network because it's so complex. And my own personal interest is in kind of understanding the default mode network in order to help inform my understanding of psychedelic research in terms of their effects on our consciousness and also how they can be used in therapy. So yeah.
Cool. And one of the things that also gets a lot of like press in the psychedelic world is this thing I see a lot in papers called the entropic brain theory or brain model. Can you talk about like, so the idea being that like when you see the default mode network, I guess under psychedelics, there seems to be much more disorder in terms of like brain activity, and people refer to this as entropic brain theory. Could you discuss that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'll start with the theory, then I'll bridge that into the default mode network in brain after. So
Cool.
the theory is basically, it's a theory of how psychedelics work in the brain, I guess. It also applies to a whole number of other phenomena and types of experiences. But basically, it's the idea that usually when we kind of function in the world, our brain is always trying to create kind of stability and certainty. It needs reality to be kind of stable. We want to be realistic. We want to be grounded, and we want to be able to function in society as like a normal, well-behaved, functioning person. So the idea is that, like in our baseline state, let me back up. So like in saying that, I'm trying to say how, our mind or our brain is trying to reduce entropy. It's trying to, and we understand entropy as like disorder or unpredictability or chaos. It's like the kind of view here is that naturally our minds or brains tend towards chaos, perhaps, and it's the role of certain aspects of our brain to reduce that and manage it and make it more kind of stable and less chaotic. So the idea here is, so the theory explicitly, it separates two types of thinking. One is primary process thinking and one is secondary process. So primary process thinking is like when it's like the more entropic, chaotic, crazy mode of thinking. It's like, anything goes. There's no logical constraints. You're embracing contradictions and paradoxes, and everything's very visual. Everything's associated with everything. This is kind of like the psychedelic state, but also, you can like it has resemblance to schizophrenia and other kind of and for example, certain states you can achieve with breath work and all sorts of other modalities. So basically this state where like, so primary process corresponds to this very hyper-associative, crazy state of mind where like anything goes and you have no kind of grounding in reality and what's real. Secondary process. So it's like supposed to be a more advanced or evolutionarily kind of more newer way of thinking where we're kind of more rational, we're realistic, things kind of make sense. It's more stable, more grounded, what we need to function in society and how we, how we go about our day-to-day life as humans, right? And so the entropic brain theory is saying that, usually we're like on move towards the secondary process side, we're more stable and there's some flexibility and some like chaos and entropy, you could say, but we're more on the side of being more orderly, because we need that in order to function and be consistent and have the stability. And so the idea is psychedelics can bring us back into the other side, back more into the entropic primary process type thinking, which allows us to kind of, escape rigid patterns of thinking and behaving. And then when psychedelics in certain parts of the brain make it more entropic, more disorderly, more chaotic. So now it's entering different states it's not usually entering. It's able to escape certain patterns. But it comes at the cost of not being able to lose your bearings, and not having that groundedness as much. And that's, of course, what happens if you take a psychedelic, right? So that's basically the idea, like linking this concept of entropy and chaos and kind of the balance between that in our day-to-day life versus other states as a way to kind of conceptualize psychedelics.
Yeah. No, it's quite interesting. You read a lot of the publications, and a lot of the big movement in psychedelic work, as you know, is psychedelic psychotherapy. It's people that are stuck inside of like depression, in which your brain might associate like anything with being depressed. But in these psychedelic states, what it seems to do is it seems to kind of able to let you think in a different way. So that you might not be depressed, you might look at a problem from a new angle, and that's where a lot of it's going. I think it's going to be like sessions with psychotherapists while a person who has like treatment-resistant depression would be sitting with a therapist and talking about their issues under this state where their entropic brain is much more chaotic in a way, so that they're not stuck in these rigid patterns.
Totally,
So I
totally. You
think,
know,
yeah, so
it
I
gives.
think it's super interesting, and it's like the question I guess I always have as more of a molecular person is like, how do psychedelics, how do they like cause this entropic brain to exist? We look at these fMRI scans and you can see that there's more entropy inside the brain, but like, why mechanistically do psychedelics let this happen, or like what's the mechanism under which that occurs? And I think that's interesting itself.
Right. What I could say about that too is like, what's interesting is that, you know, obviously, like psychedelics act mainly at the serotonin 2A receptor, at least stuff like psilocybin and LSD. And one of the 2A receptor activation does is it alters glutamate activity. One of the ideas is one of the things that psychedelics can do is it kind of overexcites certain glutamatergic kind of neural populations, and kind of induces this mode of spiking, a mode of activity that's less synchronous. So it induces an asynchronous mode of activity, which is another way of saying a more entropic. You know, things are just a bit more crazy. They're less coordinated across neurons. And so some of the thinking is that psychedelics, through modulating the glutamate system, induce like local neural population level patterns of entropy and less synchronous firing. And that then like this kind of ripples throughout the system, throughout these brain networks and throughout, you know, the entire brain, leading to a variety of changes in connectivity.
Well, I thank you for talking with me today. That was good.